Today, I'm going to show you how to make the best tennis ball rebounder for you. From lightweight design and casual player to full throttle professional. And it will take you about 5 to 10 minutes, and you can do it for under $10. And in some cases, under $5. Interested? Here we go. Thanks to all your comments and ideas, I've decided to come back and do version 3.0 with 2 ideas in mind, making it much simpler to build and to provide you options depending on how much of a heavy hitter you are. And then I'm going to also provide some insight on things from the previous design, for example, how long to make this. The materials for this build are pretty easy to find and relatively low cost. You can get these guys for under $2. If you're going to get a big spool of this, it's going to cost you a little more, but I tell you what, I've used this for all sorts of things around the house. If you don't have needles, this is a great set. I'll post below where you can get the Singer heavy duty household needles. This is not sponsored, but it's just a good set. This will cost you a couple dollars. It's just some barrel swivels. I'm using size 1. These are 8-inch cable ties, a tennis ball. This is OmniFlex. I got this for a couple dollars at a big box store. I'll post below where you can get all these things, or at least it gives you a point of reference on what to look for when you're out searching for equipment. My original design had a 2.5 pound weight. I'm showing the 5 pound weight because some people think that the 2.5 pounds is not enough. I think the 2.5 pound is enough for most people, but if you're a heavy hitter, go for the 5. Some super glue. This is gel super glue. I use Rapid Fuse, not sponsored, but it's a fairly good product. An old inner tube. If you don't have an old inner tube, you can buy a new inner tube and you'll find that you can use this for all sorts of projects around your house. Some sort of marking device. I'm using a silver Sharpie only because it works really well up against the black of the inner tube. All you need is some scissors. Although not necessary, a pair of clamps and a piece of wood is very helpful in the build. One of the most frequently asked questions of my previous build is how long to make this, and do I really need 1/8 inch shock cord or bungee cord? Let's start with the cord. This works really well. We've been using this for quite a while and it's showing absolutely no signs of wear, but it takes a little more oomph to get it out there. So I've come up with some other options. This is some 1/8 inch soft stretch elastic. You can also get some woven elastic that's 1/8 inch. This is 2 millimeter. Round cord, 5 yards. This comes in 4 yards. Here is some clear stretch cord I found. It's 0.8 millimeters. You get 50 feet. This I ordered offline. I use it all the time. It was a good investment for me, but it may not be a good investment for you, and you may want to try these out first. The original design had 16 feet. 16 feet. 16 feet. 16 feet? Yes, 16 feet. Because people were saying that it wasn't in the video. Well, it's going to be in this video. 16 feet. We'll put it right there. We'll put it right here. You can see that I've tied it off. And the great thing about this version of the design is the flexibility of adjusting on the fly the length of the bungee or the shock cord. And I found for me 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, yes, 10 feet. Boom, boom, boom. Worked best for me. So you could start with 15 feet like that, and then you could come up and tie it off like this. All this is an overhand knot. You just take it like this, run around like that, and boom, shalaboom, you're done. You can also use figure 8. And the reason why you would use a figure 8 over an overhand knot, it doesn't stiffen up as much, and sometimes it's easier to undo. So I use figure 8s all the time. It's a climbing thing. So you could probably get away with a quick adjustment on any of these. This probably might tighten up on you. This clear stretch cord may tighten up on you. But this, you can beat on it all day long, and it's just going to come loose pretty quickly. So hopefully that answers the questions from my previous video about what you can use. Initially, I preferred this. But I'm thinking, based on my pickleball experience, and I'll post up there where you can find that build, I use this on the pickleball because the pickleball is much lighter than the tennis ball. I'm probably going to do a quick follow-up video on what works best. Stay tuned for a future video where I go in and test these various cords. Post it up there when it's available and down below. After the shock cord or the bungee cord or whatever, both the length and what to use, the second most commented piece of my video was this connector on the balls. People found it worked well and others hated it because I punctured the ball and compromised the pressure. I'm pushing on this ball pretty hard and I don't see a whole lot of pressure differential. But I always wanted to take your comments into consideration and try to refine my design. So I came up with this. You can buy these certain cable ties that have a circle on the end. So I made a small puncture, inserted that into here. And you can see it has a nice solid ring on there. Glued that up, and it actually keeps the pressure slightly better than this guy does. Probably because this has 2 holes and this has 1. But then after a lot of thinking, and I decided, and I'm using 50 pound, you probably could get away with 30 pound and 20 pound. Now, one of the things about using 50 pound line is it's pretty thick. So you need to get a needle that's going to support it. And you can see that this one in particular has kind of like a shovel head on it or an arrowhead. It's not your typical flat needle. And I found that that's really helpful in getting into the ball. I've got about 2 feet, push it through, and you want to make sure you get a fairly decent tail. By tail, I mean the length of line, a couple inches, maybe 4 centimeters, 3 centimeters. The last thing you want to do is get the needle through the ball and then lose the fishing line. Don't want to make it too long, and I want to get in there, and you are getting into the rubber area. Now you can push down on the table like this, but you want to get enough in there. You just can't use the fuzz. It's just going to rip out. And you just push it through like that. And then you can kind of test it and see whether or not you're making the mark. Depending on your strength, you might want to incorporate a pair of pliers to help pull this through. Let's give it an honest test. Yep, that's pretty good. Is retrace that hole. And once you've got the first hole, it's easy to go through the second time. And I'm going to put a second loop in there. And you can see I'm losing my tail, so I want to pull that back through again. There we go. Okay, so I have 2 loops. In theory, that's about 100 pounds worth of line strength you got there. And I'm just going to bring it down a little bit more. All right, now what I'm going to do here is just take the longer end, put a bunch of loops in here, just to kind of reinforce it. Now, you could tie it off right here and be done with it, and it's probably going to work great. I think I want to reinforce it just a tad bit more by going in the opposite direction and bringing these 2 guys through. 90 degrees off from where I came through on the other side. Now, this doesn't have to be that much into the rubber as the first one does. All right, there you go. Something to tie off on. So I'm going to take this one and run it in the opposite direction so that I can tie it off. So I'm going to switch the needle to the other end. Maybe a little offset there. I've got the loop that I'm going to put the shock cord through. Then I have the 2 ends here that I'm going to tie off underneath the loop. After bringing those through, I just tied them off here with a series of overhand knots, clipped off the extra fishing line. It's off to the side here. And then I hit it with a glob of super glue to lock in the knot. Between the looping here and that super glue, that guy's not going anywhere. And it's going to really hold up probably till you wear off all the fuzz on this ball. Now you can connect the shock cord using the bowline knot directly into the ball, and that will work. But what I found is that eventually the head of the tennis racket is going to wear this out. I've come up with this way right here with the fishing line that goes around here, or 5 inches long, tied off by a figure 8 and another figure 8 super glued. This cord is a yard long, but once you get the knots in it, it's about 2 feet long. So you run this through here like this. It's nice and tight, and then you come back to the ball and you run this through the loop like that. Make sure you've tightened it down with a small loop like that. You don't want to tighten it down on the base here. And that's rock solid. And so you have this offset for the head of the tennis racket and to protect the shock cord. Because you've got the offset from the fishing line, there's a couple options there. You can use some cable ties here like I did, and that will keep it really locked in place. Or you can make a bowline knot, and the bowline's pretty simple, and it's probably good to know for a whole bunch of reasons. Your shock cord or your bungee cord, and you overlay it just like this. And then you play the rabbit game. This is what I learned when I was sailing. Rabbit goes out of the hole, around the tree, and back in the hole, and you make a bowline knot. And that bowline knot is great because it's easy to undo, but it also gives you a nice thing to lock into. You could take this shot cord and you could tie it directly into the weight. But let me show you a couple thoughts here. First of all, this weight's moving around a lot. Whether you're on a tennis ball surface, especially if you're a big hitter. If you're a big hitter, you need to go to the 5-pound weight. Most people will be able to do the 2.5-pound weight, I think. You can imagine that's just going to slide on that surface. You could damage the blacktop, and eventually you're going to wear out the weight. And if you got shot cord in there, eventually you're going to wear the shot cord off. Oh, by the way, the shot cord will kind of lift the weight up and you won't get that flat surface, so you're going to compromise and it's going to slide even more. So I've got a couple things here that I think are going to help with that. First, I've taken and put on some rubber pads. So here you got this, and here you got barely moves. And this way, you're protecting the back of your weight. You're protecting the surface this is on. You would hate to go to a tennis court, have this out there, and then damage the tennis court. I've come up with this design where I'm using a cable tie and these barrel swivels. These barrel swivels are pretty cheap, and the great thing about that is you just take the cable tie, you run it through the barrel swivel, and I make sure that the cable tie finishes off here, and then you just cut it flush. You can sand it down if you want. And that's going to take a lot more wear than any of these cords. I mean, especially these lightweight cords are going to wear right through quickly. Now, how do you connect the line to this barrel swivel? You can use this setup that I used in my previous video up there, and I'll put down below where I actually do this, and it works like that. Or you can tie this in with a bowline just like you did before on the other end. Now, you don't want a whole lot of tail down here. When I was sailing, I was able to do this with my eyes closed because I was up in the foredeck area. But so there you go, and that would work fine. I'm just using the bigger cord because it's easier to see on the video. But you could certainly do the same thing on these cable ties, and you could just use that as a connector. Okay, these rubber pads or rubber stoppers, what I did is I just took some of the old inner tube. Okay, so I wanted to fit check that. You want it to be about the distance right here. And you'll see you got white powder in here. So you want to take and clean that all off on both sides to make sure you have a clean, dry surface. Nice surface to adhere to. Then I'm going to come through here like this, have it down here. So I've got 2 layers of this rubber in there. So I'm doing a fit check first. I kind of like the way that's going. And you want to have a little bit of tension. I'm using super glue on this one because I want to make this reversible. For some reason, I want to cut it off the weight. I don't want it to stick to the weight. Maybe you're going to give up tennis someday and you want to take up weightlifting with very small weights. And I'm just taking this old cable tie. I use old cable ties for spreaders. Okay, so then you bring this down like that, stretch it just a tad, and then you wrap it around like this. Gel super glue adheres pretty quickly, and you don't want it to adhere to your fingers. You can just hold it in place for about 45 seconds, and there you go. Got a nice little offset pad that's going to protect both your weight and the surface you're going to put this on. I just realized I didn't cover this, why this thing is green. I just use standard spray paint. You can make it green, blue, purple, whatever you wanted. Customize it to your own design. You'd certainly want to do that before you put any of this other stuff on there. It just makes it so much easier. Or you can just leave it this gray. Totally up to you. I showed how to spray this in my other video, which I'll post up here if you really want to go into the details. I didn't spray the back, just the sides and above. So there you go. Using a few tools in a minimal amount of supplies, you've got a heavy hitter version of a rebounder and a normal mortal version of the rebounder, and all sorts of design trade-offs and thoughts that you can use to make your rebounder the best for you. Thumbs up and comments, always appreciated. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in sports designs, builds of all kinds, home repairs, gardening, I even do costumes, props, and cosplay, check out my channel and please subscribe, because you never know what you're gonna see.